Thank you so much. Welcome everybody, and thanks so much for giving this time to us to talk about this. I know everybody's really excited. We have a sellout crowd, and it's great to see all of you here tonight. I'd like to call up our panelists, which I'm so excited to have this great group of women. They're going to be really fabulous speakers. I hope everybody gets as much out of this as I have, just getting to know these ladies. First, I'd like to welcome Angela Woods. Come on up, Angela. Your choice. Angela is the CEO of Girl Scouts Hornets Nest, as if you didn't already know. She's based here in Charlotte, obviously, and brings over 20 years of combined not-for-profit and for-profit leadership experience to Girl Scouts movement. As the CEO, Angela is the catalyst for change in this organization. In her spare time, which I'm sure you have so much of, among other things, she serves on the board of directors for 3 not-for-profit organizations, is a Zumba instructor, and spends time with her husband and 2 children. If we could welcome to our panel Dr. Tiffany Williams. Tiffany is the Director of Computer Science Programs and Professor of the Practice at Northeastern University Charlotte campus. She's at Northeastern University's College of Computer and Information Science. She leads the Master of Science in Computer Science and the Align Master of Science in Computer Science programs. And she's actively mentoring and supervising a diverse group of students at both the undergraduate and the graduate levels. If we could also please welcome Melissa Bodford. Melissa co-founded UBAC, which is transforming the giving industry. It's a new mobile, data-driven platform that revolutionizes the way that we give, uniting all of the players, nonprofits, companies, and donors, in one connected, mobile, social impact community. Among her many accolades, she has been the recipient of the 2016 40 Under 40 Business Leaders Award by the Charlotte Business Journal, 2017 Google's Global Startup Grinds Top 50 recognition, and a 2016 Venture Prize winner. And last but certainly not least, please welcome Betsy Adilby. With so many esteemed colleagues here as members of SIM, I'm sure I don't have to introduce too much, but Betsy is the CEO and co-founder of Tech Talent South, which is a Charlotte-based coding boot camp dedicated to fostering talent and technology throughout the Southeast United States and aiding the region in evolving its high-tech hubs. Betsy has been named CIO of the Year, a leader under 40, one of 25 people to know in the Charlotte startup scene, and honored by the Charlotte Business Journal as a 2016 Woman of the Year. And most recently, Betsy was named on the Charlotte Business Journal's list of most admired CEOs. Congratulations. So you guys are all here tonight to talk about women plus STEM plus what equals success. We've got these great folks here that are going to talk about this, but really what we want to start with is why should you care? I'm going to let these ladies talk because they're much more of an expert in this than I am, but I think just as a way of background, we've all heard a lot of information recently about the importance of women, the importance of getting young girls interested in STEM at a young age. It's been brought up in the economic study that was done here in Charlotte of the importance of getting those girls into jobs that are going to create growing careers that get them on the path to success. We've also heard a lot of studies recently about the need for businesses to fill jobs with qualified candidates and the lack of those qualified candidates being present, particularly here in Charlotte. So the first question that I'd like to ask our esteemed panel is why should the people in this room care if women enter into STEM careers? Melissa, do you want to kick this off?
Sure. So a little bit of background about me, and I know we'll go through this, but I've spent about 20 years in technology and consulting, and so I've seen the evolution, I think, of the industry as women have continued to enter into this specific workforce. when I think about those questions we were talking through, there's really, I look at it from two, hi, oh, I'm sorry, oh, all right. Okay, is this better? I feel very like news conference. And so when we were going through the questions, I was thinking through, I guess, two ways to answer this. One is specific to the technology industry, and it's unfortunate to see that today computer science and technology jobs are growing, but for women and particularly for girls, it's actually declining. In 1995, and I know Angela will speak to this a lot, particularly with certain age groups, but in 1995, only 30% of women, or 37% of women were actually in technology industry, and it's actually gotten worse. So in 2017, it fell to 24%, and they're saying in the next 10 years it will fall under 20%. And so that's really significant because when you look at computer science and technology, in the jobs that are available, it's the fastest growing market, but it's declining for women and girls. And so, there are great organizations like Girls Who Code that have started to really focus on this. And really that's one why we should care, is because with diversity and inclusion and including women in the workforce, it's a clear economic driver. There's a bigger impact of this though, and maybe about 5 years ago a study came out, and it was important, particularly for us in the technology consulting industry. We spent a lot of time looking at it. It was in 2012, and it talked about the third billion. And the third billion at the time, a lot of us thought, oh, we're referring to China, the expansion of the Chinese market and the workforce. But it was actually talking about women, that the third billion is actually 1 billion women that are entering the workforce over the next so many years that were listed in the study. And it talked about the challenge that women would have of coming in and getting into certain fields and certain jobs. But if women had the exact same equal employment rate in these jobs, that we, or women, would actually be able to impact the GDP in the US by 5%. And in Japan, it was 9%. And in Egypt, it was 34%. So there's a bigger problem worldwide around the economic impact. And that's one of the main reasons when we think about businesses and what we do, why we really should care, is that this is a workforce that clearly has an economic impact. And when you realize the job market and the reverse effects that are happening with young women today, it's a huge problem that we're all going to face.
Thank you for that. That's incredibly insightful. Any other perspectives, maybe on why the folks in this room should care? Betsy?
I'll chime in. So I think about, my background is in product development before TTS, and I think about if we're building all these products for all these people, don't we need the voices of all these people interacting on these products? And I think we've seen this issue before. I was listening to a podcast the other day, and you guys will have to stay with me for a minute, but I thought it was really interesting. They were talking about heart disease and how it was as recently as 25 years ago that we realized that women also suffered from heart disease. And in fact, it's the #1 killer of women, above cancer. But it took us 25 years because guess what the cardiology field looked like? It was a lot of men. And the symptoms in women manifested in very different ways. So without the voices of, all parties, it can actually be dangerous. I mean, in fact, if you are in danger of a heart attack, it's even gendered as far as the term goes. If you have a clot, you may have heard, it's called a widowmaker. It's still gendered to this day. So it is even dangerous not to have perspectives from all different backgrounds.
Great, thank you. Lost my clicker, sorry. So what we want to do is we want to talk about women and girls in 3 different categories. The first being girls ages 14 to 17, which is one area of focus that we know we need to put some emphasis around. Another is once women are interested in STEM, getting them into the university to study those degrees and really get them into careers that will eventually help them become STEM experts. And lastly, women who are professionals that are in those areas. I'll let you all read sort of what's on the screen here, but Angela, I'd love to hear your perspective around girls 14 to 17. When you read these data points, it seems a lot like there's women, and girls, I should say, who are interested and have confidence in their abilities, but end up opting out of that. Why does that happen?
So I'm going to push. Can you hear us? Can you hear me? Hello. I'm going to push us a little bit to think about beyond 14 and 17 and push us back to girls in elementary school, because that's really when it starts, right? In North Carolina, Girl Scouts, our national organization, has a research institute, and they did a study of 26 million girls across the country. And what they found is that girls had several outcomes and indicators that talked about their physical and mental well-being. Why is that important? Because North Carolina ranked 41st out of 50. That's why it's important. And they did the study in 2007. In 2007, girls were, we were ranked 35th. We're going backwards. And so when you think about the economic pipeline for women, it's starting earlier and earlier for girls. And so 14 to 17, quite honestly, if you don't have girls that are interested, that are proficient in reading, because we all know math proficiency comes from reading proficiency, right? So if 57% of our girls in North Carolina are not reading on level, their ability to translate to math and to STEM is going to slow them down. And so you don't even get to the 14 to 17 level. So what I would encourage be thinking about is, as we design programs, be thinking about how we design them at the younger level. Project Scientist is a wonderful organization that really tries to target girls at a young age. I think the other issue, and I think you mentioned this, Melissa, is the whole issue around girls may be very versatile in STEM, but if they don't have confidence and they're not sure of their abilities, it doesn't matter, right? And so that really is kind of the focus of, you know, kind of the holistic approach, I would say, that we need to take a look at.
Great, thank you. And for the young women who do go into university and do study these STEM-related degrees, if you look at the numbers here, they're quite low. You know, they're 18% of computer science graduates are women. Tiffany, could you speak a little bit around why these numbers are so low? What degrees are women choosing over STEM degrees, and why?
Okay, so
Yeah, you got to get really close.
I get really close. I don't know if mine's on. Okay, I do this one. Hello? Okay. I dropped the mic. I'll just hold it. So actually, I want to go back a little bit in history. So we were talking about the 90s with computer science. I want us to go back to the 70s, maybe even the 80s with computer science. And we wouldn't have had this discussion about women being in computer science at that time, because actually that was a very fruitful time for women to be in computer science. And so one of the things that people do ask is, well, what happened? There's a lot of different hypotheses and so forth, but one thing that does seem to come up is around the 80s is when the development of the personal computer came into play, and there is some belief that essentially during that time, the personal computer was marketed as a toy for boys. And so as a result, a lot of girls were not introduced to computing, especially when they wanted to pick a major, let's say it's computer science, from like 1984 and on. So when we talk about why don't women pick computer science, I think part of it is, again, we just can't get over the various stereotypes that are associated with computer science. So when so at Northeastern Charlotte, I'm over on a program which is designed for women who have a bachelor's degree in any major but computer science to actually get a master's degree in computer science. And so when I tell them about this program, I can see on their face, I'm not good in math. I don't want to code by myself. You know, I don't want to be a geek. I want to have social skills. I mean, you can just see all right? You just see all of these different things kind of running through their head. So I think when we talk about why don't women pick that, I think environment and stereotypes and all of those various things that come with that is one reason why women don't pick that. So now when you look at, and lack of role models and all of those different things. So then when you look at things that women do pick, nursing, going to medical schools. Actually women, in terms of science, most of the undergraduates who are in biology are women. So there are actually a high number of women who are biology undergrads. If women pick mathematics, they're steered towards teachers, being a high school teacher or something of that sort. So not that that's a bad thing, but it's just in terms of being a high-level mathematician, let's say going to a professor or a research lab or something like that, women typically aren't steered towards that path. So women are choosing majors that have technical, for technical attributes, But I think women still clear of computer science and engineering because of the various stereotypes and environment that are associated with that.
That's so interesting. I say this all the time. I think I shared it with Mike the first time that we met when we were getting ready for this panel. I was a business major and finance, all of that. And I actually didn't know that I was in technology until my boss, Courtney Ramey, told me I was 2 years ago. She was like, you've been doing large system implementations for 5 years. You're in technology. I was like, I don't think so. No. She's like, yep, you are. So I do think there is an awareness around what a technology career looks like that women just largely are not plugged into. So looking at women who are professionals in technology, a lot of the stuff here that we've heard already, you know, young girls not getting engaged, and then at the university level there's stereotypes to overcome. And a lot of those stereotypes, correct me if I'm wrong here, guys, is really, you know, you are the only woman that's going to be in that room, and you're going to be different than everybody else. As women, professional women, Betsy and Melissa, I'll let you guys speak to this. Not that you're not technology professionals, but we'll let the other two here speak. How often have you been either the only or the first woman at the table in a work situation? And what was that experience like for you guys?
I can go first. So I'll talk about when I learned to code. So previous TTS, I ran a product development company, and then I got really excited. I had been teaching myself and seeing people come into our doors, and they wanted to build mobile apps. And I thought, well, one, we're missing out on this big market segment, and two, it's kind of hard to watch individuals pour their life savings into a physical product, which may or may not have legs. And I thought, well, if I can empower folks with the skills to code, they can build out their ideas for, you know, the cost to host a domain, $40. It's awesome, radically different than hundreds of thousands of dollars in physical products. And so I said, I'm going to take off to Chicago, and I'm going to learn to code in this thing called a coding boot camp. And I got there, and it was amazing. I was the only female that traveled for the program, the only one. So I was the only one that looked for the opportunity to go learn these skills in a short, condensed amount of time. There were other women, but they were already organically in that circle. The other time, and that was when I knew at TTS, I need to build out an ecosystem, right? I didn't just need to recruit students and teach these skills. We needed to run startup crawls and build out a network where folks just got drawn in, gatekeepers to tech. But I also, you all probably know there were a lot of acquisitions in my market early on. It was really wild. And I entertained a couple things too, and went on a lot of management calls. Went on quite a few at 8 months pregnant, which is an enlightening thing. I never once was in a management call with a woman. And I remember sitting with my 30-year-old male co-founder, and each time we would be in a management meeting, they'd be like, and you know, if this was to proceed, Betsy, what are your plans after? And it took me a while. I think it took my co-founder saying, hey, Betsy, they're asking if you're going to work, for it to have that light bulb moment. And I thought, well, man, you know, life can strike anybody. Yeah, I'm having a baby, but Richard could be hit by a car tomorrow, and you're not worried about that. And it was one of those moments where I realized, okay, I have an opportunity to set an example for other folks. And I know that Melissa has had similar experiences, and I'll let her talk about that too.
Yeah, and similar background. So when I started my, oh no, I'm off now too. There you go. There we go. We're gonna end up with a collection of the mic
Roll
right
down.
here.
This one. Does it say you want this one? It's probably right here. Hey, Kim. It is.
Oh yeah. Oh well, this is working. Okay. Similarly, I was a psych major, and I just thought I was just going to be a research academic, and that's what I wanted to do. And I somehow got into coding in college, and I was plucked out of a recruiting class to go work for a year in between undergrad and graduate school. And quite frankly, I was just dirt poor, and it was a job that paid. And it was like, if I can pay off my loans, I'm going to go do it. And I got shipped off to the federal government, up to DC, and it was probably the first eye-opening experience of being with like the DoD in technology, and being the only female in certain meetings and rooms. And it was just, you know, at the time I was like, I'll take whatever because I got to get paid. But it was an eye-opening experience to start to learn. And since then, where my career has evolved out of the federal government into financial services, which is also a fairly male-dominated field, I traditionally tend to be the only one or very few women in the room. At Accenture, where I was a partner, we take great care in terms of our career development to keep our talent, particularly women, particularly diverse women, because we see women falling out right between the phase of consultant and making executive. And it's a huge issue that actually impacts across the whole industry. And so to Betsy's point, to be an example to other women, to clear the executive hurdle and then clear the partner hurdle, and then you just keep going, to senior partner and so on. It was something, and I know we'll talk about later around, what our perspectives are on how to encourage other women, but it does keep you in the game. It does keep you where when I go now and speak with like junior achievement at South Mech, that, I was there for a full day and I saw 6th, 7th, and 8th graders, computer science and business. And the entire day, 30-some kids in these classes, I only saw 12 girls. And you realize that, it is those of us that have stayed and are focused in the technology industry that we need to be out there and we need to be showing the example that it is possible to have these careers and be successful and enjoy it, that it's not so scary to know math and science and see, at the time, not green screens anymore, but, not to be scared of these languages, that actually there's power behind the data, and then how do you turn that data into a successful career in life?
Thank you. All right, so heard a little bit about the different groupings of women. We've heard a lot about, just why it's important to have women in these STEM careers. But still, we're finding that women either don't ever get there or they leave once they are there. And so a lot of this has been a little bit negative. So I'm going to start with a more positive question here of, are we seeing this changing at all? And I think, largely, Angela, correct me if I'm wrong, a lot of the change that we're going to see is going to start really at those lower ages. So are we starting to see that change happen at all?
Hello. Okay. Yes and no. I think where girls have a network of support, constant support, you're seeing the change. But in our community, I don't want to be Debbie Downer, but I'm just a realist. There are a lot of girls who don't have that support. They may be smart as whips, but they don't have the social capital that they need to make that next level. So I would say where you see the gaps in our community largely fall around racial and socioeconomic lines. So depending on your zip code, frankly, is where you start to see the difference. What can you do? I think this organization is already doing it, getting involved with organizations like Project Scientists, like the Y and others, Junior Achievement, so that you can be that network and that social capital builder for those girls. Because again, what I hear from these two ladies is you have to have an amazing amount of confidence to walk in to situation after situation, get turned down, be the only woman, and still stand in your power. And so I think there's opportunity there, and we're not going to lose the game, but we just have to be aware that there is a gap.
Great, thank you. Betsy, you're seeing things from a little bit of a different perspective, maybe not so much at the lowest age groups, but are you seeing anything changing?
Yeah, and I think we could debate whether it's confidence or stupidity. But
I'm interested to hear that. Go ahead.
no, I see a lot of changes, and actually in each one of our markets, when I bootstrapped the company for 4.5 years, and I saved money by teaching kids to code, and initially they were paid programs, and it was, so I knew how to code. I did not know how to teach adults, so I was comfortable teaching children. So bootstrapped around, teaching kids to code, $500 a head, and we had some folks email in saying, hey, I want to come, but I can't afford it. And I had this moment where I was like, oh, this is karma. I cannot have. And I'm like, free scholarship for you. And so forevermore, we've had free kids code at TTS. But the hardest part about that has always been the accessibility. So I had this great intent of thinking like, all these people, the masses would come, but there's an accessibility issue there. And if I'm honest with myself, it's probably most of your kids that come to our free kids code, so you should be paying us. So I agree, there's an accessibility issue, but with the younger kids, one of the things I do think is really cool is I've seen so much of a shift. Really, toy makers have led such a path. I think about JewelBots, which are these bracelets for little girls that you can code and they light up together like buddy bracelets. And a WonderBot, I don't know, I have 2 kids, so you guys all now know the advertisements that come my way. But WonderBot is this cute little blue ball on 2 blue balls that kids program to code. And what was so interesting is I read a little article from the CEO of WonderBot, and they did all this testing with both boys and girls before launching the product. They wanted to make sure it was very gender neutral and exciting to both. And originally the product had the wheels displaying, and they realized that girls associated that with trucks and therefore didn't want nothing to do with it. They lowered the body, the wheels are hidden, and now they have almost 50% female users, which I thought was really interesting. And then from a TTS perspective, you know, we teach our B2C product. Most of our students come through with a bachelor's degree, similar to what Tiffany was saying. You know, they may have gone to UNC Chapel Hill and they were a French lit and dance major, and then they've been working at Smelly Cat Coffee a bit too long and decide, hey, I need some additional skills. So what's been so great for me to see is that demographic, those smart, soft skills for days folks are coming in to get technical skills. We just have to allow them an entry point into these fields so they can climb the ladder and be in leadership.
I see you shaking your head, Tiffany. You know, I'm sure you can tell us a little bit about the reasons that women leave STEM, but also, are you seeing any change as women start to get more degrees, or if they're getting more degrees, how are they being put to use once they leave Northeastern or whichever other university?
There's no other university.
I agree. Just for the record, I am a Northeastern University undergrad alumna, so I'm with you.
I'll just say a little bit about my personal history. So actually, I've been coding since I was 12. And so I think one of the things about that was that my mom didn't know anything about coding, right? So this is like the 80s. And so even though I wanted a computer and all of those things, she never was really that interested in coding. But she never, she never said, why do you want to do that? You know, girls, they don't do that kind of thing. She never said that. And so I think sometimes when we're talking about social capital or getting people involved or confidence, sometimes the confidence comes from the people who are right around you, right? So if your mom is not into it, your father's not into it, your aunts or uncles or grandmothers, it's really hard to go into the field if the people around you are not supportive. So even though we're talking about what can we do in the community and teachers and so on and so forth, each of us has a personal responsibility for the people who are in our immediate purview to make sure that we don't dispel anything in terms of them going for something that we may not truly understand. So I would just say that. So then in the 80s, we weren't talking about girls who code, black girls coding at all. So I think in terms of that, I think it's really great. When I was growing up, there was this computer magazine called Run. And in Run, they had a full listing of programs that you would type in and that wouldn't work. And so basically you have to go and figure out where your error was and all those things. In there, it was interesting. You could send in $10 or $5 or something like that if you didn't want to type stuff in, and the person would have their address in the magazine for you to send them money to send you back a floppy disk. And so as I'm reading that magazine, I never thought of it being a male-dominated field, because really in the magazine was mostly about computer listings. It wasn't a lot of advertisement about boys having computers. It was just really about computers. And so I think for me, it wasn't until much later when I got to undergrad did I really realize that, oh, I'm not supposed to be here, right? It was too late at that point. So I think part of the whole thing in terms of the images that we see, the people who are surrounding us, has a lot to do with whether we're going to stay in it or not. As far as, I'm a big proponent of environment and cultural forces and things like that. Just recently I went to a company. It's a little bit more mature than a startup, but it's still a little bit in startup mode. I won't say the company. But I walked around, I see in display cases dump trucks. I see walking around pictures of males in a technology company. There's one picture of a female in technology who is Beyonce. And so if I'm like, I don't know what Beyonce has to do with technology except for the airbrushing, I don't know. And so the point is that leaving that company, even though they're doing a lot of great things, personally, I left there thinking I wouldn't want to work there, nor would I want any of my students to be a part of that environment. And so I think this geek culture, this what do they call it, programmer, all of those kind of things, if we're in environments that have that, we actually have to find ways to mitigate that because people will leave. That's just not a culture that is sustainable for a diverse group of people.
I personally have never heard of programming.
Yeah.
If you'd indulge me a minute, what are the stereotypes, just so that everybody's sort of talking the same language here a little bit? Would you just indulge us a little bit?
So I guess at least the stereotypes to me, or at least some of the things that I've seen. So before I was at Northeastern University, which we know is the only school in the world, I was at another school, which was Texas A&M University. And I was there for 12 years. And I would talk to all different types of students, and they would tell me all different types of stories. One of the things that came up a lot for the female students was if they said something in the meeting, or if they were in a project, this is a better example. Let's say they were in a project. Immediately, they would be given the quote-unquote secretarial roles. Take notes. Make the next meeting. Maybe you can design the user interface in a way that has nothing to do with code, right? But if it's like, hey, write this efficient algorithm to do X, that's going to be given to a boy. So there's this stereotypes where the woman doesn't know her technical skills to be of a contributing factor in that way. There's another one where the next level, if you are confident to get over that, the next level is, well, what you know is not important. Oh, well, no one uses that algorithm anyway, so I don't even know why you know it, right? So there's that level of just really being dismissive. There's another aspect of it, which is you're just there because you're a girl. They needed to have diversity, they needed to have people there, so you just got in because you are a girl, right? Not a woman even at that. I think the other aspect of this geek culture is that essentially you have to work 24/7 in order to be able to accomplish anything. And I think we see that a lot in work cultures. So if we're talking about Google or Microsoft, there's a reason they have a foosball table and good food and all of those things, right? They want you to be there, all right? Which is nothing wrong with that, except that if you can get your job done in a way that doesn't require you to be there 24/7, you shouldn't be penalized from a promotion perspective if you can do your job in a more flexible work schedule. So I think all of these things lead to environments that ultimately people who don't fit that mold ultimately leave. I think me personally, the level of dismissiveness would be enough if I wasn't where I was at my current level. I don't know, I would have left a long time ago myself.
Thank you for sharing that. I see a lot of head nods. Anything else to add? Okay.
Just amen.
Yeah. So the other side of the slide is really focused around, women getting their ideas heard. And when I pulled these data points together, I was a little discouraged, to be honest. I just started to see these numbers, and I was like, personally, I haven't run into this where I don't feel like my ideas are heard. But looking at these numbers, I have to ask, and we haven't heard from you, Melissa. So, I mean, is there something you had to go above and beyond to do to get your ideas heard, even?
For me, I'm probably in the same boat as you. I was really fortunate. I mean, despite being in a very male-dominated field in the federal government and then security defense and then going into financial services, I was fortunate that I was surrounded by just some incredible men. They were incredibly respectful. And yeah, there were some, there's always challenges, but just enabling me to to be confident to be able to share ideas. I do think part of it's also is I'm going to tell you my idea, and it doesn't really matter if I'm telling a woman or a man. If you don't like it, I'm going to do what I think is the right thing to do. Even with UBAC, I think I was fortunate enough that this was an idea that I had, and I was like, I'm just going to do it and just see what happens. So I do think that does come along with your development as you become an adult. But quite frankly, my ideas, I do think were heard because in some small way, this is where I do think men are very receptive to hearing a different perspective. They might not like it, they might not take it, but they are at least in my experience, they are open to it. It might have started out as a whisper, and then as I got more and more comfortable being in that environment, it became more of a voice, and then eventually a shout. But I've been fortunate that a lot of the men I've worked with have been incredibly supportive, and I think that, and that says a lot, quite frankly. We talked a little bit about the home. And I think if there is a father figure or a male figure that is very respectful towards women and teaches that to their daughters, respectful to their wife, they do bring that into the workplace, and I've just been fortunate that I've encountered that.
Any other perspectives in terms of getting your voice heard? Any challenges?
I hired almost all women, and now I'm realizing that I just wanted them to listen to me, and that was very smart, with the exception of Daryl. So Daryl has to deal with that on a regular basis. But I think the fact that I did that was subconscious, but it was so I knew I surrounded myself with folks that understood my outside of TTS experience, which is I started a company. We went to 11 locations in 5 years, and I had 2 babies during that time. And my husband is GC of a startup here too. So it's busy, and I wanted to surround myself with folks that understood my narrative outside of the workplace and said, hey, Betsy, you've got to get to that swim class. This is just as important. And I think that probably is lacking in some more corporate environments. So that's why I would say it's been very great for me to have folks that understand, the home life piece too.
Great, thank you. That actually segues pretty well into our last slide, which I do want to spend, a fair amount of time on. We've heard a lot of these things coming up, of talking about careers in the right way, bringing awareness around what is a technology career, talking about a woman's role in a different way than maybe you would from a job description perspective, recruiting differently, making sure that there's family leave and that there's great maternity and paternity leave options from a company perspective, but there's also things that you can do as an individual. And I'd actually encourage you to look at your table and see if it's mostly men, mostly women, or if there's a healthy mix. I would dare to say most of these tables are either largely women, largely men, with a few standout tables here of a good, healthy mix of folks. But it's very natural to want to be around people who look like you and who you assume go through the same things as you. And so I'd love to get the perspective from each of you around what it is, and I'll start with the women. How can women help other women in technology? And I'm gonna start this off with my usual spiel. Like Melissa, I've been really fortunate. All of my mentors in my career have been men, and I have had more negative experiences with other women. So I think women need to support other women, and I find it discouraging when they don't. It's hard for all of us, so I'll kick it off there. But I'm gonna pass this down, and we'll just go down the line.
Similarly, I actually have the opposite of again, being surrounded by men, and most of even my leadership team now is mostly men. I think it's just how I've grown up in the past 20 years of just being surrounded in that environment. But also, quite frankly, I didn't have women mentors in those fields. You didn't see, I think I met one girlfriend when we were at an agency together, and they're just not that many. And then coming into financial services, it was a lot of in banking and capital markets, and again, there were just more men than women. And I haven't had too many caddy experiences with women. I think my experiences with women, and this is, the long answer to your question, which is, being that example. I think that was probably one of my saddest days was probably leaving Accenture, was because there were so many women that, was either in my counseling circle or in my practice that, for whatever reason, they felt that by me leaving, there was this, it was just sad because they thought they weren't going to stay either. And that was discouraging because I wanted them to stay. I left for, different reasons. I just wanted to have another half-time career. And it's just, that's, I think, unfortunate because if we don't set the example as women around the, I hate that word work-life balance, but how we prioritize what's important to us at certain points in our lives, like that's the example we should be setting. And, again, around... I look back and I try to stay in touch with the women that are still at Accenture that, you can have this, flying around all the time career and still have just a great life. So we need to continue to be that example. And I think even giving back, like going back to, South Mech, junior high, and showing women or showing young girls that there are women CEOs. I was just with Venture for America. I don't know if y'all know about that organization, but essentially it focuses on placing entrepreneurs with seasoned entrepreneurs to help them get into startups. And there were some girls in the final rounds, and I was serving as a judge, and she literally said, I don't want to go that route of being a CEO because I just didn't. You're the first time in all my years that I've seen someone in a technology CEO role. And I was just like, oh my God, that's terrible. Like, what are we living in now that that's happening? We didn't get into the statistics around, but I think it's important information for folks to know, and I guess I've just been living and breathing this a lot with organizations like Girls Who Code, but 66% of girls want to go into technology between the ages of 6 to 12. Like 66%, that's over half that want and have some interest in technology. And then it drops at 13 to 17 to like 32%, and then it drops to 4% upon entry to college. Like, that's really bad statistics. And so when you think about, trying to stay that example in that course, the more women there are in technology, and I guess this is probably the answer to other women, is that we should want to do more for our women. But on the men's side, going back to that study I referred to with the $3 billion, men in this room that have leadership positions that are running businesses, regardless of how developed a country is, the number one factor for women, separate from equal pay and advancement and preparation ratios, like all of that comes out. I mean, always equal pay is at the top. But it actually comes down to the care economy. It comes down to child care, caring for the elderly, and caring for the sick. And that's the number one most effective lever that businesses and men can pull in order to raise women up. Because women are naturally the primary caregiver. And so when you think across a business, like what can you do to help women be more successful, ask them about their care situation. And when the silver tsunami is coming, which is now, the biggest thing that's happening, and we're going to be positioned between caring for our parents and our children, it's just going to put more pressure. And those numbers I talked about before, where it's getting worse, that women aren't going into technology, it's only going to get compounded. And so it's just something to think about that, yes, all about equal pay, all about everyone having the same, skills and abilities to get equal roles, but it really actually comes down to the care economy.
Okay, what are we asking again?
What can women do?
What can women do and what can men do? I don't know. Let me see. So in terms of, I think there's all different kind of personalities, and I think depending on your personality, there will be something that you can do. For example, if you are a manager or a person who's in a hiring position, take a risk. So maybe that person or the group of people who you're typically interview, sometimes when we're looking for a diverse set of people, we expect to look for diversity using the same metrics that we've used to get the diversity that we don't have. And so And so as a result, if we want to have a different group of people, we possibly have to do a different set of metrics, which doesn't mean that they're less than or whatever. It just means that we want to do a different kind of search. We want to look at and we want to highlight some other things that people may bring to the table. So in other words, I think don't be afraid of taking a risk. Maybe it won't work out, but maybe it will. Most people will work out if you show that you care about them and you give them the resources to succeed. So I say if you're in a hiring position, whether that's for technology or not, right? I would say take a risk on somebody. If you're not in a hiring position and you are out in the community, go to a different place that you've never gone to in Charlotte or wherever you live. I spend a lot of time in the South Park region. That's where I live. I should spend more time in maybe East Charlotte or other areas so that you can start seeing things that you would never see before because you get caught up in your local everyday routine of things. And then finally, if you have money to spare, buy a computer for somebody. Give money to scholarships for students to take free coding classes. I mean, the point is that whatever your personality is, whatever is, within your reach, we don't necessarily need you to go out beyond your reach, but the point is start somewhere. And there's always something from where you are, that's something that you could possibly do. And that goes for both women and obviously also for men. And a final thing I'll say about all of this is I don't want men leaving here thinking like, oh my God, we're the problem. Well, you are. No, I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. So, no. But the point is that as women here, and I've experienced it myself, some of the biggest challenges have actually come from women in the field and not males. And so I think we as women need to figure out why are we such problems instead of problem solvers. Oops, take this one. Yeah.
How many of you have teenagers in your house? Okay. Anybody have girls? Good. Okay, so ditto to everything they just said, but I think the most important thing that men and women can do is talk to their children, right? And talk to them again, and talk to them again. Because I think we know everything, but you really don't. And I think as a leader or as a manager, it's important to understand what's happening with children, whether they're being bullied, whether they're experiencing the stereotypes. Because believe me, if it's happening in your workplace, it's happening in their school. That's what I would challenge each of us to do. Talk to your own children, and then talk to some other children that don't look like your children. Ask them what's going on. I get my best information from I shouldn't say this in public, but it's already saying, I get my best information from my 16-year-old daughter. Now, there's a lot of stuff she tells me that I really don't want to know. But it's important that I know it so then I can design and really think about how I can guide her if she wants to choose a career, right? How do I encourage her? So those are real simple things, but I would encourage you, because in a technology era where we're all rushing to do, and I'm on my phone, you're on your iPad, there's a lost art of communication with your family and with the children that are in your family.
I'm going to echo a lot of what they just said, but I think about this particular demographic and what can you do, and I hear all the time that we have a talent issue, right? We need more talent, we need more talent. I'm like, I'm trying. But we need to change the way we think about hiring, to Tiffany's point. So there are amazing women that have the technical chops to fill these roles, but regardless of if they were an MD before, an attorney before, a lawyer before, they're never going to fit that box that says master's in CS. So we have to think outside of the box, and there are organizations doing that, but there need to be more.
All right. I'm going to open it up for questions, but first, any closing thoughts, closing remarks, anything you want to leave this group of people with that hasn't been said yet? Okay. Any questions for our panelists?
Can I get a speaker?
Come on up. We're all wired in here.
Thank you. First, thank you, ladies, for coming and talking in front of us. I'm a computer science student also. I did a bachelor's and master's in computer science, and I hardly find any girls in our classes. And when my father talked to my son, he says, don't do what your father did. Because he know that I go out in the morning and don't come back on time. That's the IT life. I think we all have it. So he doesn't know IT much. He's a 90-year-old in India. But he tells my son not to do what I do. And I tell my son the same thing. They don't do computer science, but the reason is different. I'm just lighting it up. I said, there's no girls in the class. Okay. So going for computer science is not a fun. Okay? In my time, I always take 20 credits a semester because there's nothing to do. Okay? And he's doing the same. He is doing the same. So things hasn't been changed much since late 80s or 90s and today. As I was going through the registration, I see that 30% of attendance or registered is women today. Okay? And only 13% are member. I certainly like to have that increased to 30 to 50%. Okay? That will be very helpful. Now the question comes. I have two teenagers. One is computer science. One may be going toward medicine, but not computer science. So as a leader, as a women leader, what would you do? How do you encourage the girls to come into the IT field? Okay? Because being a manager, discriminatory word, I told my HR that every 3 resume, I want 1 girl. Okay? And believe me, I haven't got that. I told them to hire a girl if they have Java in the resume. I didn't say it. Okay? So we need to encourage, we need to do something to encourage women or girls to come towards computer science. Okay? So as a leader, my question is, what have you done? What we are going to do? And what, on the other side, the men, what we can do for you to elevate that and address that issue? That will be my question to you guys.
I feel like you have to connect with them on their level. So when I was teaching kids code, and we had really an even split between girls and boys, we would teach very differently to the 2 groups. So I would have a lot of girls, and I would say, well, don't you want to build out a website where you can sell your friendship bracelets, or you can, you can go on Shapeways, and you can design your own pottery, and you can print it out and get it shipped to you. That's so cool, and that's something that resonates with them, and I don't think they identify immediately the connection with STEM. They're just excited for that opportunity. So instead of saying, hey, Jenny, here's some Ruby code, hash this out, present something that's a lot more exciting to them.
So I would just say a few things. One is, as much as I love computer science, my goal is not to make everyone a computer scientist. The issue for me about why girls don't go into computer science has nothing to do with whether they should do it or not. I'm more concerned with they don't think that they can, right? That's really the issue. So if you don't want to do it because you don't like it or have an affinity for it, that's fine. But the issue is if you say, hey, I don't want to go into it because you don't think that you can do it, you don't think you have the intellectual ability to do it, that's actually the problem. So what I would say for your teenager or who is going into the medical field, do they have a genuine love for medicine And if so, I will be their first patient. But if it's more like they are going into as a backup because it's like, I really want to do computer science, or I really want to do computer engineering or something like that, but I don't know if I can do it. I don't want to be the only one. I don't want to be teased. I don't want to be looked at as a male, all of those things, then that's where we need to actually fix the problem, right? So I want anybody to do anything that they love. I just don't want anyone to be distracted or to be held back because they love something but they don't think they can do it.
So that's my question is, so, yeah, you don't want to do, forcefully something, but how do you make them interested in computer science? Though they will be channelizing their energy,
But if
or
they
they will
have-
be,
But if they have a love for medicine or they have a love for animals, I don't want to distract that. I
No,
really don't.
That's obviously different. Don't
Okay.
want to go argument, okay? Medicine is another good thing.
Okay.
But I, being a selfish as an IT guy, I want to have more girls in my team, okay? I still have that dream I had 20 years back, okay?
So you may
So
have-
I want to have more girls in our team. What I would do today to bring them into how we make them interested to come to, today we have only 30%, not even 30% in the audience.
Talk
Why?
to their friends.
Yeah? We are doing it. But I'm saying that as a women leader, what you're doing.
Yeah, and I want to speak to that. I'm one of them. And I don't have a computer science degree. Can you believe that? I have a PhD in chemistry. And my company, the company I'm working for, has just been acquired. And the new owners, they do women in IT courses. They are a Swedish company, and they believe in diversity, and they believe that diverse teams perform better, and that's good for their bottom line. So what I can recommend to all men that are hiring and want to increase the female ratio on their teams is don't look for computer scientists. Look for female that are interested in the job you're offering. Don't put too much computer lingo into the job ads. Female tend to try to meet all the criteria you put into a job ad. So female try to meet 100% of what you put into the job ad. And men, and that's statistics, think once they meet 50%, they are good enough to apply. So that is a very big difference when it comes to confidence, whether you're ready or not to meet requirements that are out there for a job. So I would encourage all the men here tonight that are hiring and want to increase the girls on their teams, don't look for computer scientists and change the job ads in the way that females think they can meet the requirements.
Thank you. All right, one more question.
So to go back to that point of women who are changing fields in order to come into computer science, what do we see as some of the greatest motivators, the attractors for people who are already on a career journey? And I've heard a little bit from the panel, but some of the attractors from coming from other fields into computer science, and besides just changing the job recs, which I absolutely agree with, what can we do also to make that more welcoming and a more attractive option?
You can pay Tech Talent South for a scholarship.
Yeah, I'm just kidding, I'm sorry. Or a couple scholarships. When we see them, most of the folks that come to TTS in that capacity have tinkered in code or something in some way. So they've touched it. Maybe they were a product manager and they wanted to know enough to be dangerous to get better at their job. So they had seen the development side and they really just want to make the move over. When I talk about accountants and doctors coming over, that happens too. Those folks typically either dealt with a CRM that they hated more than anything at their practice and want to build out their own. But they really have motivating factors for learning those skills. But primarily, they're folks that have touch this already. They know they're already pretty literate in technology. You know, maybe they're graphic designers, maybe they're front-end developers already. They really want to be full stack. So they're adding on to an existing skill set that's relevant.
I would say for those of us who are seasoned girls, it's about economics, right? It's about adding and developing and broadening your skill set and understanding where the market is going. I think I was talking to a colleague of yours about, I happen to be on a startup fintech company. And for me, understanding what technology does, not just using it and being good at using it, but what the trends are, helps me as a business leader to make better decisions. Because if you don't have the knowledge, and I don't know how many of you have made the wrong software choice, and it has cost your company, I think it's important to keep your skills relevant. And so I think you can approach it from a much different standpoint. And I think you who said, when you're hiring people, it's about aptitude. And there's so many people out here who don't know how to code, but they do understand project management, they do understand business processes, and technology drives a lot of that. And so as a company, a person that runs a technology company, expand and look at not only young girls, but seasoned women who might be looking to make a change.
Yeah.
I mean, I can. No, I mean, I probably would have answered. I answered the question a bit differently, just because I went from corporate America to go into startup and start a fintech company. I just asked myself, why did I do it every day? But I mean, I should have just stayed at Accenture. But I mean, the reason why I did it was, it was kind of that whole why not. Like I was curious about. And luckily, I talked about before, I was a psych major and I didn't know anything about technology, but my first engagement was doing an HR implementation, like HR systems, like old school, like ERP and PeopleSoft, and eventually now it's like all Workday and all that. But I didn't know anything. But it does teach you, to your point on aptitude, you just want to learn something different. And then you start realizing, oh, I'm pretty good at this. And then you just compound until the point where, with UBAC, I was like, well, we could just go and use any of the technology that exists today, or we could just go try and build it ourselves. And that's what we did. But to that point, we got to a stage where we had to go hire an expert who, actually does coding like with us now, which is fantastic. And I know Ruby, but other than knowing the words Ruby, I don't know anything about it. But it's fascinating, and it's just actually, but that's where you just bring other skill sets to help you do it. And I think that's where, going back to the young girls, and I'm just really concerned about Charlotte and where we're going with technology and the talent, what happened with Amazon. I mean, we've got a great population of young kids here that could stay in Charlotte, and Charlotte's ecosystem and technology is growing. And how do we keep that talent here with these great schools? Apparently the only school in the world that's here. But to keep that talent here in Charlotte, and I think it just goes back to Angela, your point about being in the home and starting that example. I mean, I'm a mom of a young, she just turned 4, but there's great, in terms of accessibility, there's great programs in nonprofits like Discovery Place is doing the full year of STEM. And it's fantastic to see that there are these programs that kids can go through, and there's a learning journey that doesn't stop at the age of 4, that it keeps going till 16, and then 16, figuring out, TTS and where that path goes here in Charlotte. It's just, I think, as parents and, as concerned citizens in the community, we just have to take the effort to find the resources. But when you've got books like Rosie Revere Engineer and Ada Twist Scientist, like these are just basic kids' book, but my daughter loves it, just loves the understanding that, she doesn't know who Rosie Revere is, but in cartoons there's a whole story. But there's also boys. It's Iggy Peck Architect. And I think that's what's important, is starting them on that learning journey early. And then eventually when they do make it, after 20 years in corporate America, and they're not afraid to take a leap to go do something else.
We are just about out of time. Thank you for the great questions, and thank you for the wonderful responses. I know I've learned a lot. I hope that you all have as well. I'm not sure who can stay or not, but I'm sure some of these ladies will be available if you want to chat with them after. Thank you so much.